And welcome back to Talking Point. Now, we left you with a question earlier. We asked you how many books or the books that the library buys every year. Give you a few options. The answer is 1 million items a year. And in fact, children's books form a high proportion of that. And you can guess why, because of the wear and tear. So kids do go through a lot of the books very quickly. Coming back to our discussion, one of the issues, we mentioned the word pulped. And I think that was right early on where the library had come out to say that they had not just removed the books, but had pulped the books. And I think that got many people upset. What is the message we're sending to children, I guess, when we say something like that? Yeah.
When we pulp the books?
Yes, when we pulp the books.
I think the message is a very negative one, because it's almost it's almost like you're burning witches at the stake. And the message that is sent to the kids, I don't think it would be a message whereby we are not supporting freedom to access to information or knowledge, because I don't think kids would understand that. But to them, it will be like, why are you burning these books? What themes are behind these books? Is it LGBT? Why are you burning them? Is it because they're bad, they're immoral, and they're sinful? And if this message gets into the minds of kids, then how would they behave towards their peers who are LGBT? I think that sets a perception which is quite negative, and it could trigger bullying in the schoolyard.
So pulp versus just removing the books sends a very strong message. We have a caller on the line with us. Audrey, you're with Talking Point. Go ahead, Audrey.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My issue is more on the pulping of the books. Heine said, I think it's Heine, people who destroy books eventually destroy people. The metaphor is that we are destroying knowledge. So where does it end? If we continue on this path, destroying what we disagree with. A library ought to be neutral, above cultural wars, because this is an issue about humanity, not just about about Singapore and its pro-family views.
Okay, well, thank you, Audrey. So I guess what we're saying is pulping any book, for that matter, I guess, would have just come across the wrong way. So how can the process be improved? What should be done? Some have suggested perhaps there should be an advisory panel that sits with the library when they go through the review of books that have been flagged for whatever reasons to then decide what should or should not stay. I'm going to go back and because we have it, guys, on a Google Hangout. Geraldine, you still with us? Maybe get your thoughts on this? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess from a psychological perspective, I think, the pulping of the books actually sends a shock through the society. It's not just the kids. I don't think we're just talking about the children here. It sends a message to the adults that those themes are wrong, because we know what those themes are, right? And if we look at adoption, how soon should you tell the children about adoption? If there's a book on adoption, do we burn it?
Okay.
Or do we actually, put it aside for therapeutic purposes?
Right.
So
Geraldine, I'm going to have to jump in because what we like to touch on now is basically about how we can move forward with what the library has been doing, the processes involved, in terms of, we suggested perhaps an advisory committee. Some have even said a group of parents, perhaps, for the children's section. I'm going to get Adelia, maybe your thoughts on this.
I think maybe more community involvement. Maybe if the library were to, say, publish a list of books that was currently undergoing review and put it out to the public and get comments and feedback. I know that sort of means that it will be a lot more labor intensive for the library, but I think because it's a publicly funded institution, it is the public library, all of us are stakeholders. So I think the library should involve the community and maybe not cherry pick just a few parents or cherry pick a few people just for a fixed permanent panel.
But I think the actual execution of this is going to be a very difficult task to make. I'm not sure if I got my stats right, but I think on average every year apparently NLB would have to do away with like 5,000 books.
Well, they review about 4,000 to 5,000 children's titles each year.
Right, yes. Right. So that number alone is quite staggering. And how are you going to execute this and make it work? It's going to be a very big challenge. And so this is something that needs some discussion and some thought. Yeah,
but that's just a logistical process. I mean, we can't say, well, there's only 5,000 books in that sense. If you get a whole bunch of parents in different groups to sit together and work out the process, is it worth... I mean, what should we do moving forward? How can we make the system work better?
I think without going to the logistical concerns, I think there are two things that we need to pay attention to. One is that if we decide to set up a panel or committee to decide on whether books are suitable or not, then that panel has to be diverse. It has to be comprised of people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different religions, different age groups, different genders. So that's one. And the second thing is that I think the process, whatever it is, has to be exploitation proof. Because I think in the past months or maybe years, we have seen instances whereby very well organized groups with certain intent have actually used various creative tactics to amplify their voices, to make themselves louder than they really are. So I think whatever process that we put in place has to prevent that from happening. It cannot be abused.
I think the process will take more time, more resources, but it must be done because we have to engage the different groups. And that only then, I think people will see NLB as having honored due process, and there is equitable treatment for all parties involved and interested.
Well, I want to share a comment with you from Today reader Elvin Tan. He had written in to say that NLB's measure should have been more nuanced to accommodate the diversity that is already existing in a rapidly maturing Singapore society. So I guess the question here is, should the National Library have been more sensitive to, I guess, what is current? How would having an advisory committee or the parents panel we suggested, how would it help them in that sense, be more relevant?
I think, like I said earlier, I think one of the things about this whole issue is the timing of it. So in that regard, I agree, yes. I think NLB might need to really revisit some of these processes and how these things came about and how they are communicated to the public. So that certainly must be looked into. I agree, yeah.
Well, okay. No, so I guess we all agree that that there needs to be some processes and measures put in place to ensure a due procedure is given for that. And just another quick quote from Marcus Quack, who wrote in on Facebook and saying, I guess the library has many differences, but one of it is about accessibility to knowledge as well, and I think we all agree on that. Thank you so much. We've run out of time. I have to wrap up the show, but thank you all for coming in, sharing your thoughts and insights with us. For all our viewers who are watching out there and for listening in on 938 Live as well, if you have thoughts on this issue, we do still want to hear from you. Our Facebook page is always open, facebook.com/talkingpoint. You can also email us at voices@mediacorp.com.sg. Otherwise, thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Join us again next Wednesday evening for another lively discussion. Until then, I'm Stephen Chow, wishing all our viewers and 938 Live listeners a very good night. Good night.